My name is Sarah Arter, here with the Project Next Generation at LaSalle Public Library for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. Sitting here today with James Massat. And James, you want to start off and tell us about when you were born?
Well, I was born August 19, 1942 in LaSalle, Illinois at St. Margaret's Hospital, which isn't there now, but the Vet Center is up there now, but that's where I was born.
All right. And how about your parents? What did they do? They live in the area?
Well, they're deceased, but my dad was born in Sandwich, Illinois, and my mother was born in Jefferson, Missouri. Her dad went all over the country. He'd throw his hat up, and that's where he'd end up. So he ended up in Arlington, Illinois, and my dad, he ended up in Peru, Illinois. He was construction, and my mom, she worked at Spillers and Spillers, West Clocks, and some of the different places. She didn't work steady. She was more, we raised chickens when I was young, so she would help clean the chickens and and stuff like that. So,
okay. Very interesting.
yeah.
And do you have brothers, sisters?
Okay, I had one brother at first, Joe Massat. He was, he lived by the motorcycle, and I'm going to say this, he died by the motorcycle. He worked at Ottawa Silica in Ottawa. He worked there for, about 35 years, and about the time he got ready to get retired, that's when he died down in Jefferson, Missouri on a motorcycle. And then there's my sister Lenora. Now she mostly worked at Walmart her last 20 years up by Bolingbrook, Illinois. After she got married, she moved around. Her husband, he done the spud killing, and that was what his job was. He owned and operated a company. Okay. And then I had a sister, Lorraine. She got married at 16, and then it didn't last, and then finally they ended up with divorce, and then she just kind of went on her own, and she died from diabetes. And then my youngest brother, Jerry, well, he was a little wild. So, but he worked around here at different places, and then finally he straightened out and he moved to Ohio, up in the northwest corner of Ohio, but he did straighten out. So,
did any of them serve in the military at all?
My brother, he served in the military for 1 year, and then he got a discharge. He couldn't adjust. My dad, he went into the military at 13. I think it was right around 1918. He went in the military. He lied about his age. He was big for his size, but he kind of managed to learn how to drive a bulldozer and different equipment in the military. So when he got out, then he worked for Hallrichs and Trompeters here as a mechanic and a bulldozer driver and that. So that 1 year in the service did him some good.
And what branch was he in?
He was in the Army.
Okay, all right. And what were you doing around the time before you entered the service then?
Okay,
Growing up?
I worked at Del Monte on weekends after I got out of high school. Then I went on weekends, and near their end of their seasons I worked at Del Monte, and then I worked full-time at Prattle Cabinet Corporation, but they would be slow during the cannon factory season, so I would go and work over there. And I did a few odd jobs here and there before I went into service. Yeah, I worked almost 3 years at Prattle Cabinet Corporation when I was drafted into the service.
Okay. And so you were drafted, did not enlist?
I did. Well, you want me to explain it now?
Please.
Okay. I ended up serving 19 years in the reserves and 5 years active. I was drafted for 2 years, and then after about a year and a half, then I took 4 years, but it ended up to be 5 years because they counted the year that I took it. And I signed up for Germany or Europe, and I did get that. After I enlisted, then I ended up in Germany.
Okay.
I was at Fort Knox, Kentucky, is where I took basic training. I was one of the fastest ones on the low crawl and these spars. I was pretty good on them two things. I wasn't exactly real good on some of this.
Can you explain what those things are? So you're pretty good on what now?
Okay, you know, you have these bars that you grab, 1, 2.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, okay. I could do them real fast.
Yeah.
And then the low crawl was where you crawled.
Sure.
And them were my 2 best things. I don't know if that was what you would call a good thing, but it was my best. And when I was in basic training, I was old. I was almost 26 years old, which would be old in the military for basic training.
And this is when you were drafted at 26?
Yeah, I was drafted at 25 actually, and got out of basic at 26, and everybody else was about 18, 19. So.
Was that an experience being with a lot of younger guys then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they kind of looked up to me when I could stay up with them.
Sure.
And everything else, you know, because, well, we had these bars at Washington School, and every day after school from 4th grade to 8th grade, well, I did them bars. And that's why I could do it so good.
Oh, sure. So they were looking up to you for all for that stuff, as well as I'm sure just age too.
Right.
Yeah. Which branch of the military?
I was in the Army.
Okay.
And also the Army Reserve. Like I told you, I did 5 years in the Army, and then I did 19 years in the Reserves, and then they gave me a 5-year buyout, and then they never gave me a discharge till I turned 60. That's when you can draw your retirement, when you do part in the Reserves and part in the Army. So they actually, my discharge says 33 1/3 years is what they're paying me for.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't think I mentioned it, after I got out of the service, I did 35 years at Mays Nail.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, when I was in the Reserves, I was working at Mays Nail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. It's an interesting place. I've been around the factory a few times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're more like a family operated thing, and I still work with Nancy Mays over at the museum.
Oh, sure. I know Nancy. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So, where'd you do all the training? Where was basic training? Did you have to?
Okay, that was at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Yeah.
I told you, that's where all our gold is supposed to be.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I could have showed you that in the pictures, because I did have a picture of Fort Knox, and then I got a picture of where the gold is at, and where I took basic training.
Yeah. Okay. All right. How about the instructors at basic training? What were they? You remember them at all?
Yeah, I remember this one sergeant. At that time I smoked, and I ran out of cigarettes, and I asked this guy for a cigarette, and I lit it up, and here's this drill sergeant in front of me, and he says, "You don't smoke in my formation."
All right.
So I started off on the wrong foot.
Did he never let you forget it?
No, they never let you forget something like that.
Yeah.
So he would harass me and this and that, but that's kind of normal, you know.
Yeah. You didn't have to do odd jobs and stuff the whole time you were there?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they did. They were short a garbage can lid, so they sent me out to run in another unit and steal a garbage can lid from them, and he gave me some details like that, or he would make sure I got at the mess hall and had to do the garbage cleanup or peel the potatoes or things like that. So
was any of your training specialized for anything?
after basic training, I went to radio school.
Oh, okay.
And then after I finished radio school, they had this day room, what they called the day room. They had me remodel that until my orders came for Fort Eustis, Virginia. Well, when I got to Fort Eustis, Virginia, that was a transportation unit, and they changed my MOS. Instead of being a radio guy, I ended up making bread, delivering bread, and then they sent me to another school as a stevedore that's loading the ship with these wrenches and stuff like that. And that's, I think that's how I ended up when I went to Germany. Then I ended up in supply there. So, and when I went to Germany, if you want me to go through that too, I was in a supply depot, and they put me as a clerk in supply. And then my whole career in the military ended up being supply. I started out as a Spec 4 in supply, and then I ended up as a property book, what they called a property book officer. That's where I took care of, when I was in the reserve unit up here, I took care of supplies on tanks, your field gear, your helmet, everything in that battalion was my responsibility. And then after I finished there quite a few years, they transferred me up they sent a lieutenant colonel down to Peru unit, and he asked me if I wanted to stay in the reserves, and I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, we got a job up here as an IG inspector. So I went up there, and then they guaranteed me that I'd make E8. And that's very hard to make when you're in supply.
And what is that? What does that mean?
That's a master sergeant
Okay.
with an E8 rank.
Okay.
I got pictures of it here and that if you want to see it or that, so. But I think I got it. Don't I? Okay. This is how I started out as a private, and this is how I ended when I got out.
Okay.
So.
A little bit of an upgrade in uniform.
Right. Yeah, it was just basic training. That's how I looked at that 25 years old. and
Very nice pictures.
I was, what, close to 45, 50 when I got out of reserves. By the time I got 30, and then 40, 50. Yeah, but I think it was 1950. No. Can't think of the year now. But, oh, it was 1991. Yeah, that's when I got out of the reserves.
Okay.
So, they paid me a pretty good pension, though. I ended up pretty good on that, so.
Well, it's quite a neat uniform there.
Yeah.
When you were getting used to living the military life, was it easy to adjust to it, or was it?
I think I adjusted pretty well after basic training and then the schooling, and then when I was over in Germany under the supply depot and that. And I must have adjusted to it because when I got out for 5 years, and then they moved that reserve unit here in Peru. And I says, I'll go up and give them a rough time. And I went up there, and it was a Mr. Murphy I talked to. And I was kind of giving him a rough time, and he said, well, we can bring you in, but we'll have to bring you in as a Spec 4. They was going to take one stripe away from me. And I said, well, I don't think I could go down one stripe. So I left, and then 2 weeks later, they sent me a letter and told me to come on up there. They'll send me up to Chicago, and they'll give me my E5 stripe back. Okay. That would be these 3 top ones. Okay. I made the 3 bottom ones in the reserves. So they did give me my E5, and then I went up and then made it up to E8. Okay. Was how I did that. Okay. So.
And that happened over what period of time then?
Well, I got out in 69, and then I went in 72, and then I got out again in 91, was when they offered me the buyout, and by that time I was figuring, well, I'm kind of getting old, and then I figured, well, I'll take the buyout, and then I ended up with 33 in the 3rd years anyway.
So, where did you serve where were you serving?
Okay, Fort Knox, Kentucky. From there I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia. That's where I had radio school, and then they made me a carpenter afterwards. Okay. Then I went to Fort Eustis, Virginia, and that's where they trained me as a stevedore. And I was making bread there and delivering bread. And then one time I was supposed to deliver bread, and there was a ½ inch of snow on the ground, and they told me I couldn't check out a deuce and a half. And I told them, well, I'm from Illinois, you know how much snow we get. And the guy says that don't make no difference. If they get a ½ inch of snow there in Fort Eustis, Virginia, then they would stop. It's just like, that's it. And then when I was at Fort Eustis, Virginia, twice I went up to Washington, D.C. Our CSO, they had these trips. You pay a couple bucks, you stay at a Navy base, and then you would go up to Washington, D.C. Well, at that time, us guys, we could walk all over because it was in pretty good shape. You know, today if I went to Washington, D.C., in fact, I did quite a few years ago, but I walked all over there and went to Arlington Cemetery, to the Washington Memorial, and all over there twice. Our CSO would have trips there. And then after I went to Washington, D.C., then we had a few war games. That's where they would wake you up about 4 o'clock in the morning or something, tell you to go out and camouflage yourself and play on the beach and pretend you're in a war game. And then after I spent time there at Fort Eustis, Virginia, then I went to Fudenheim in Germany. And that's where I ended up being a supply clerk in charge of a machine gun. And while I was there, France kicked us out. We had supplies in France. France told us to get our supplies out of there. So then they ended up having us work day and night just to get these supplies from France there. And then we had a small town next door where we would go, in Fudenheim was the name of it, and we'd have a few beers. And well, they had a fashion season like this Oktoberfest, and they would walk in a tavern, you'd get a beer, and then you'd run out the street, and everybody would be dancing on the streets. And it was more or less like a party time. So, yeah. And then after I was there, and I went up into the Highlands. Can't think of the name of it. But anyway, I went up there on TDY, and I was on transportation up there. That was where they give you extra pay and you're helping another unit out on their trucks and that. And we ended up going on bivouac, and then we would be camping out in the snow, and that wasn't too much fun.
Sure.
Right. And then when I came back, they sent us back to Mannheim. Then I went up to Stuttgart, and I learned a little bit about skiing. And then when I was there, I went to Innsbruck, Austria. This was like on a leave. So then I went to Innsbruck, Austria while I was there. And that's where they had the 1960 Olympics, was there in Innsbruck, Austria. So they still had some of the stuff there still up, to ski lifts and that. And then I suppose I had another fashion season, and then I got my orders to Vietnam. And then when I went to Vietnam, they took us from, or around Washington DC up to Alaska. Then we went sort of around Japan, and then we went into Vietnam, kind of the long way around. And there I was stationed at Sac Trang, and that's way down in the Mekong Delta, almost as far as you can go in Vietnam. And there, that's where I gave you that sheet there, part of it. I was in supply there too. And then it ended up, while I was in supply, they had a guy, he was getting short. So then he didn't want to fly no more, so they put me in flying for the supplies. And I would go to Canton, yeah, and Sac Trang, Mekong Delta, Long Binh, Vinh, and I would fly all around Vietnam. Sometimes I'd get in these firefights and everything like that. And I was kind of like a radar. I had to go and try to give them some type of supply for the supply I wanted. If it wasn't something we ordered, we would kind of trade back and forth. And that was kind of mostly what I did down there in Sac Trang. And then after, well, we got hit quite a bit with mortar rounds and items like that. And then one day maybe you'd get some mortar rounds shot in, and then maybe 2 or 3 days later you'd be going downtown. That I also have pictures of their marketplace and some of their Buddhist temples. The monks would let me go into their Buddhist temples, and they would open like the window a little bit. They could only open it so much, and then they would let me take a picture. So I do have quite a few pictures of Vietnam that are probably rarer, that not a whole lot of people got. And we had what they call a mama son. They would clean our barracks. And we also had a mama son that worked with us at the repair part place, and she invited us to her daughter's wedding. So I also do have pictures of weddings, a wedding over there, which probably a lot of people don't that. So that's pretty well. And then I went to Van Tao, was where I made another stripe. E5 was where I made E5 when I went there, because the unit I was at, I couldn't make it there. And I was at a supply depot there. They put me back as a supply depot. And it was pretty quiet around there till about January 1st, and then they hit us with a lot of mortar rounds. That's when they had the Tech Offensive, and they hit it almost all over Vietnam at that time. The North Vietnamese did. So.
And this was in the northern or southern part of the country?
I was always in the south, more below Saigon.
Okay.
Yeah, I should have brought that map. I got a great big map. I could show you where Saigon is. And
was this how many other guys were, or soldiers, how many other guys were down there at the same time as you, do you think?
You mean in Vietnam?
Around the same area that you were.
Well, I think we had, well, what was there, about 5 million went through Vietnam or something like that. 500,000 died almost, or shot. Let's see, you're trying to, what was the?
No, I was just wondering, geographically where you were in the South, were there a lot of other guys there at the?
Yeah, in the
same
different units. You
Right.
had Cameron Bay, you had Sac Trang, you had Saigon, you had Vung Tau. Now, Vung Tau was like an R&R center. That's where I went to make my E5, was at Sac Trang. I mean Vung Tau, and it's what you would call an R&R station. It was in Vietnam, but it was an R&R center where you had a beach, you had all this stuff. You didn't even know you was in a war zone when you was there. And that's how they surprised us there. They hit us. We thought, you know, everything was safe, and then all of a sudden the Tet Offensive started, and then we got hit pretty bad in that.
So is this, that part of it, does it bring up memories? I mean, were you involved directly in combat then?
At Sac Trang as well. They hit us pretty well. Mostly I was with, they'd be out in a rice paddy, and then they would shoot in at us, these mortar rounds. And most of the time I was in that type of combat where they would hit us, and then you'd get the helicopters up and they would disappear. In fact, I had one mortar round. It went off, I'd say less than from here to where that window is, but when it shot up, it went this way. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you. But I think that's the closest I came to death over there. I had a few times I was in an airplane, we'd be flying from someplace, and we'd get in the middle of a firefight and that. But other than that, most of the battles were they'd shoot out of a rice paddy.
Okay.
And then we'd get the helicopters up and they'd be gone. It was in them tunnels. I don't know if you ever heard about them tunnels, but they had tunnels that they'd go underground and then they'd come back up.
Yeah.
We'd get back in and then they would shoot in.
Okay. So is this, are these memories that did you lose some friends? I mean, at this time, other soldiers that you were fighting with?
I don't think I lost any friends. We've had a few that got wounded, but we were kind of lucky. A few of us got, you know, the shrapnel in them or something like that, but I don't think wherever I was at, I was never where somebody lost a life, where they came close or something like that, wounded or something. But
did you have any friendships that lasted past your time there? Did you make some?
I had some friends that lasted for a while, and then they just like faded away. There was people I was close to in Germany. In fact, there was a couple guys from Utica I met over there. Russ Matthews, well, he don't live here now, but he lives in Sandwich. I lost track of him. There was a Russ Meyer, I think was his name. He lived in the valley. He passed away though from cancer. And some of the friends I met and that they passed away and that, so.
Were you able to stay in touch with some of your family at home when you were abroad?
Yeah, we had mail back and forth. In fact, my mother, she sent me a Christmas tree about this long. She wrapped it up one time, but it died by the time it got over there. And what'd she do? She took a coffee can and she put a bottle, a half pint of whiskey in there, and then she put popcorn in that. And then I had one aunt, she sent me over fudge a few times. My brother, well, he's a comedian, he sent me over some cigarette butts. So you had your sense of humor,
sure.
Also, you know,
Sure.
as well as good times with the bad times. I mean, like I was telling you, I went to these Buddhist temples and different pictures I got of down in Sac Trang of the people, and I also got friends with some of the South Vietnamese people as well, you know. It wasn't like, okay, I'm fighting in your country, I don't like you, you know. I wasn't like that. That's why I was probably invited to that wedding. And when I was in Germany, I went with the people there too, you know, and I had friends from other countries and we didn't even speak the same language. And that, in fact, this one German guy, he wanted some bottles of aftershave lotion. So I gave him 2 bottles of aftershave lotion. Well, he gave me this stack of money like this, $1 million marks. Well, it's like our Confederate money. It was worthless.
Okay.
And this other German came up and he says, nix good, which meant no good. And I said, well, I want it as a souvenir. So I kept it, you know, and said, well, that's all right. And then I think I had this other lady, she gave me some old Fennings, 510 Fennings that were 1916. And, you know, in that age, and I still got them at home. So, but,
Cool.
And then on R&R, I went to Penang. It's a little island about 50 by 50. And this monk told me to come on in. Well, I went into this Buddhist temple and there was a bunch of snakes. You never seen the guy move out so fast.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, that was their religion.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my goodness. What other kind of things did you do for recreation while you were out there?
When I was in
While you were in Vietnam. Yeah.
Vietnam, well, we'd go and, like I said, we'd take pictures there. We had our day room. We'd play cards, or maybe we'd have a party, a steak party, maybe steal the steaks away from the officers, and that. We read a lot over there, and we had like like different places you'd have like a day room with a pool table in there and that, so.
Alright. So when the war ended, where were you? Where were you when it ended?
When it completely ended?
Yeah.
Well, I was probably working at May's Nail. That was in 62. I think that was, no, 70. 72, 73, I think it was 73. Yeah, I think I was working at May's Nail as a millwright.
All right.
So,
And when did you come home? What year when year did you get back?
well, 69, June of 69. I went in July and I spent 2 years there.
And was it easy to get readjusted back, or did it take some time?
It took some time. I'll admit it, I drank quite a bit, and it took some time to adjust. Well, something I never mentioned was my wife. She went through a lot there, you know, at that time. And well, she passed away from cancer in 2003, but we got married about 71, yeah, 71, a couple years after it. I think she went through a whole lot with me, you know, but she did it.
Have you kept in contact with anybody else any other vets that you knew?
Well, I know a lot of vets in the area that I wasn't with. We have meetings together at the VA up here, and we kind of go to the Liberty restaurant once a month and we'll eat together. There's probably about 15 or 20 of us for the one at Liberty. There's about 8 that goes every Thursday. Usually on Thursday, if I'm not busy, well then I go up there.
So, let's say overall, any life lessons, experience, words of wisdom you can offer to the camera for just your time and what you experienced?
Yeah, with the experience, you mean that I got through the military?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it had good effects on me, and it had bad. Like I said, I had a rough time when I first got out, but I learned to adjust where I had to, you know, because you have to work and you have to do this and that. So I think I adjusted pretty good. I have backlashes now and then, you know, or I don't think I sleep enough. I'm awake probably about half the night, even today after this long away from combat. You still sometimes have it now. Like when I was married and the wife was there, she would say, well, you had a nightmare last night, you know. Well, now I sleep alone, so I don't know if I probably still have the nightmares and stuff like that, you know, because sometimes I wake up in the morning and the bed sheets are all over, and you know, and there I gotta make the bed again, you know, but I think most people that's been through combat, they never forget it, you know. it's something.
Well, with that, I'll say thank you.
Did
And,
we make a half hour?
Yeah, we've been talking for about 45 minutes or so.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, thank you very much. Concluding interview with James Massat on June 8th of 2017. And thank you very much.
Well, anytime, that's